Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. My questions are around price gouging and the excessive pricing regime. In December, the Competition and Consumer Industry Code's Food and Grocery Amendment, Supermarkets Excessive Pricing Prohibition Regulations 2025 were made. Now, firstly, are these regulations where the government's works on this issue will end, or is an actual bill in development?
Jason McDonald, First Assistant Secretary, Competition and Consumer Policy Division. So there is the price gouging legislation which has already been introduced into Parliament and will begin from 1 July this year. Is that what you're referring to?
So what I'm trying to ascertain is, what is the legislation going to do that the regulation can't do?
So, this gives the ACCC enhanced powers to look at excessive pricing by supermarkets, which they should be able to then look at when supermarkets are charging excessive pricing and take action.
And the legislation that you referred to, that's a delegated legislation rather than a bill. So what I was actually asking was, is there an actual bill in development?
No, the amendments to the Food and Grocery Code, which is what we're using as the instrument, that's it.
Okay. Under paragraph 45B(1)(b), it provides that no penalty can be applied in the case of price gouging to a person who is not a body corporate. What is the purpose of this paragraph?
So I think the intention is that there are still obviously penalties for the business, but that is to avoid people, that is to avoid a manager, say, of a local supermarket from giving a discount and then being thought and then risking them being charged and having fines on it, and therefore not having the incentive to give the discount. So we wanted to avoid unintended consequences where businesses weren't able to offer discounts or discounted pricing in sort of special circumstances, and then the individual themselves be held accountable for it, so the local manager or the local person responsible for pricing. But the penalties are obviously still there for the supermarkets themselves.
So, just so I have it on the record, if a person within a very large retailer directs that retailer to engage in excessive pricing, they're not held liable?
This will be probably a better a question directed at the ACCC about how they're going to implement it and what they believe the scope of the legislation is. But the intention of taking out the penalties for individuals was to allow the individual managers to make price discounts without the fear that they wouldn't do it because of the risk of how it would be implemented. But the penalties are always and have been intended to target the supermarkets themselves.
But wouldn't you see that as a loophole for people to, exploit the system?
The advice that we had a lot of discussions with the ACCC about this, and I don't think they think it's a loophole.
Excessive pricing is defined by the rules as supplying or offering to supply a grocery product when, and I quote, the pricing for the supply is significantly excessive when compared to the cost to the very large retailer of the supply, plus a reasonable margin, end quote. What does significantly excessive mean in this context?
I think it means the normal definition. When you are able to charge a price after you've taken out all of your costs, including a rate of return, then that would be considered excessive, and I think it's in the normal, the average consumer's understanding of it and of what that means.
Are you able to give us a percentage of what that would look like?
You can ask the ACCC how they intend to administer it, whether they're going to have rules of thumb.
But does the department not have an indication or gauge of what that's going to look like?
Well, we would leave it to the regulator to assess.
Okay.
So, I mean, we always get this tension between, do we want a kind of principle-based law that sets a high-level kind of expectation, or do we want to have very detailed law that tries to prescribe what outcomes there are?
Sorry, I missed that.
That tries to prescribe exactly how things are going to work. In this case, the government's made a decision to go with a high-level principle approach. That reflects effectively the approach that's been adopted in the European Union in respect of excessive pricing laws. they have a history there of cases beginning to unfold and unpack, kind of court cases unfold and unpack how that prohibition works. And so, there's a body of international jurisprudence on this that can be drawn on. And obviously, as Mr McDonald said, it's something for ACCC to turn its mind to and consider what guidance it gives supermarkets about how to interpret it. But ultimately, the courts will be the test bed for its application. And
was that the courts?
Ultimately, the courts. So, and if you think about the Competition and Consumer Act, it has very kind of high-level principle-based laws around misleading conduct and unconscionable conduct. These are really important laws and a system to make sure our markets function efficiently. Those laws have been more effective for being high-level and principle-based and able to capture a range of developments rather than being very prescriptive.
Okay. Well, let's hope that's the case. What does a reasonable margin mean in the text that I read earlier within that context?
So, as an economist, a reasonable margin will mean a margin sufficient to encourage the business to perform the activity, a rate of return that allows them to perform the activity. We're trying to target economic rent as an example. It's not obviously in the legislation because it's difficult to get an economic definition, a legislative definition around it. But a reasonable rate of return is a normal rate of return in an economic sense, and everything above that would be an excessive rate of return, which is economic rent. An economic rent is a return not needed to keep that factor in its current job.
Sorry, what was that last part?
So economic rent, we want the supermarkets to continue to provide goods and services to the community, and a normal return, a reasonable rate of return would allow that to happen. An excessive rate of return means it's above that and they're earning more money than they actually need to provide that good or service, including a rate of return on their capital, risk adjusted.
Has Treasury received any representations from the ACCC about what it thinks excessive pricing is, or is that left to them?
We would rely on their analysis, and there is some analysis, I think, in the supermarkets inquiry which led to this around profits and profitability of the sector. And I presume they would use a similar kind of methodology when enforcing this legislation.
Can you shed light on how will the cost to very large retailers of supply be determined?
I think that would be something directed at the regulator, given it's at the operational level.
You're at 8 minutes.
No worries, I've only got two more. Given the many factors that affect supermarket prices and the volatility of those factors, how will the cost of supplying products be able to be reliably determined?
So that is the reason why it is a principle-based legislation. It requires analysis of the facts on a case-by-case basis, and that would be something that the ACCC will be determining.
I'll definitely put these questions to the ACCC as well. What new information systems will be developed to assist in tracking the cost of supplying products to enforce the excessive pricing regime?
Do you mean by the ACCC or by the supermarkets?
By the ACCC.
That would be a question that's directed.
Do you have any information of how the supermarkets may navigate that?
So we have had a lot of consultations with the supermarkets when we were drafting these provisions, and we were looking at the information they already were providing the ACCC, and we don't expect them to be making significant new investments in new information gathering or ways of providing information to the ACCC. So we don't expect them to be making significant investments to comply.
So, but the onus is going to be on them to comply, and that's on the ACCC to ensure that they comply, but we don't know what systems they're going to put in place.
Well, I think the expectation is the information that the ACCC already has available for them or could get from the supermarkets, it will be sufficient.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll put these to the ACCC later. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.